Welcome to the Becoming Soul You podcast, everyone. We are doing our first guest podcast today, and I'm so honored to have Ashley here. This podcast is dedicated to sharing honest and real stories about healing, the life journey, awakening moments, all about becoming your most authentic self. And we have the privilege of speaking to Ashley Rodriguez today. Thank you for being here. And Ashley is a Latina, a Boricua Priestess, and a student of life. She's a Reiki master, energy worker, sound therapist, facilitator, a licensed massage therapist, and an educator in this world. She's been mentored by a lot of different amazing medicine women and has undergone shamanic ceremonies and training. And right now she's a chemistry teacher in high school as well. Ashley and I met, it was years ago. I don't know what the exact time it was. If you know, let me know. But
No, honestly, it's like a blur. I don't remember
yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
we met a really long time ago. And we're both part of the same sorority. So that's kind of how we were connected. And I think we met during a time where we were both spiritually growing and just figuring out who we were as women and as souls, and kind of having a spiritual awakening almost at the same time in a way, really
Mhm.
navigating our businesses. And during that time, Ashley was actually one of my first coaching clients when I started to, and I felt called to become a coach and really help and empower women. And it's kind of crazy that, you're my first podcast guest and you're also my first coaching client. So that's really like, I love the parallel there. And at that time, we worked on getting Ashley a little bit more organized, creating more self discipline in her life as she had a lot of things going on. As you heard, she does a lot of things.
Yeah.
So um, we really worked together. As my client, we worked together on just getting, implementing more self-discipline strategies and how she could take care of herself during that time. So we've known each other during different stages of our journey, our paths, and Ashley's taught me so much as well. I know as she was learning, she was also teaching me a lot of things that she now does within her business, Vibes del Alma. And yeah, I'm so happy that you're here today. So we are going to jump right in. I got some questions for you, and I want everyone to know how amazing you are and all the great things that you do.
Oh, thank
So,
you.
yes. So first, you were born in and raised in Puerto Rico. I'd love for you to kind of bring that into today's conversation about how can you tie that to your personal journey, and where, what does that look like, specifically coming from an ancestral lineage of intuitive women. So I'd love to know more about your personal journey, specifically being from Puerto Rico.
Yeah, that's actually very synchronistic too, because in the past 5 months, I would have to say maybe like 6 months, I've been really realizing how my ancestral connections have been shaping and are continuing to shape like where my spiritual practice has gone and where it's going. Um, But yeah, like I lived in Puerto Rico when I was born and raised there until the age of 11. When I was in Puerto Rico, I was pretty much with my grandparents most of the time. My parents were just providing the best amount of resources that they could with like working, so I would not really see them because they were working. But we had great healthcare. We had a great house. We went to a
Mm.
private school.
Amazing.
um, yeah, and then my grandparents took care of us, and, tying it into somewhat of a spiritual situation, right? Like, my great-grandmother passed away while I was in the house, right? So, we woke up, and my sister found her body, and she had just passed away in her sleep, and I'm bringing this up because I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. My sisters were, but I was not, and I'm the oldest one of 3, so it would make sense, like, if out of all of them, I should be the one to be able to go, but for whatever reason, I was
Mm.
held back and not allowed. Come to find out later, it was because my parents knew that I was spiritually inclined, and they knew that I could get things attached to my body because the same thing would happen to my dad when he was a younger child. So I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral for that. But anyways, we ended up moving to Florida. And once we came to Florida, it was an adjustment, but it wasn't too hard of an adjustment. I had known English, and we were able to come together as a family unit a lot easier and a lot better. We got to kind of like relearn who our parents were. They got to relearn who we were. It also helped my relationship with my sisters for it to flourish and be a lot more beautiful than it used to be, right? Because I used to be like their second mom, and now like I can actually be their sibling. So all of that kind of came together in Puerto Rico.
Yeah. I mean, so okay, there's like a lot of things that happen here. I think, you really saying that realizing how much of your spiritual journey and the things that you're doing now really do stem from that moment. And in a way, like I can relate to that too, as when I was growing up, I'm also the oldest. So I was like the weird oldest kid who would see things. And, I would feel different presence as well, and, I noticed that my family I don't know if they, like, intentionally left me out of those types of conversations, but every time I'd say, "Hey, I see this spirit," or "Someone's there," or "I feel something," it was just a bit like, "No, no, no, no," like, kinda brushing it away, so I totally kinda get that with, like, being Puerto Rican and, like, those spiritual gifts and kind of
Mhm.
like that crossover. So, you come from, like, an ancestral lineage of intuitive women, so it's definitely it definitely, like, plays a role in the stuff that you do now, and I wanna know more about what is that journey with, like, pivoting from maybe career and, going the ideal route and, like, your education, and I know that you have a biomedical science degree,
Mhm.
um, and what did that look like, kind of shifting from being in the worldly career path to now navigating, like, your spiritual gifts?
Yes, and that also brought a good point. Like I stopped myself because I was like, I could keep going to talk about
Yeah,
my
yeah.
life, but so I come from a lineage of spiritual women.
Yeah.
So on my dad's side of the family, my great grandmother was a white witch. That's what he calls her. Now, I think I haven't honestly found the label that you would put on her because she didn't do santeria. She didn't do espiritismo either. And it's not like she had like a white table and like, but at the same time, she did practice magic and she did do witchcraft and she did do things in the name of God, right? Like she would be a devoted Christian. She would go to church, she would fast every Sunday. She had crystals, she had herbs, she had Florida water that she would bathe in all the time. She would heal my dad with like tinctures and like different things that she would put together. She has protected my dad's family from attacks of other witches that are in Puerto Rico as well that were just envious, right? So she did that and it was just a part of her living, right? Like, and
Mhm.
she is my great grandmother. So the way that she grew up was probably very close to the land already.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she had that within her, and she was one of my guardians that worked with me when I was starting my practice. And she's the one that's helped me also from the spiritual realm develop my intuitive abilities. On my mom's side of the family, I have another great grandmother that also used to be spiritual, but she did it in a very closeted way. And it wasn't because she was ashamed of it, it was because of 2 reasons. One of them was because it was taboo, and she's just like, "It's not" in her mind, from what she, like, admitted to me, it was like, "It's not that deep." As in, like, my purpose or her purpose in that lifetime wasn't to change the way, it was just like, how can she live a normal life and yet have a practice that brings her peace behind closed doors, right? So, she was very intuitive, she practiced with crystals as well, with herbs, just like any Puerto Rico like, any home remedy that you've heard your family talk to you about, especially from Puerto Rico, all of that is folk herbalism. On my mom's side of the family, there's 2 women. I just talked about one of them. That was my paternal great-grandmother, and then my maternal great-grandmother also practiced spiritual things, but she wasn't as involved with it.
Yeah.
So it's like I have 3 women that I know of that I've connected to that have practiced it in some way.
Mm. Yeah, and, I think with I think for people listening, with the Santeria and with, the things that we're talking about might be a little bit kind of like far-fetched from like what people maybe ideally would, magic is something people really don't talk about even now, right? And I want to know, how do you approach with your, the different modalities that you teach and, are really advocating for? How do you approach people who don't know much about that, and using like your science background? How do you really have those conversations with people who might not be familiar with the work that you do and how it's actually healing?
Yeah, so back to that with the biomedical sciences degree. I knew a lot about the body. Even back in high school, I started taking anatomy and physiology then, and I learned about the physiology, the hormones, the chemistry that happens in your cells. I'm a chemistry teacher now.
Very good.
Um, and after my biomed degree, I did become a licensed massage therapist. And I will say, all of this is super far fetched, right? I have a bunch of different things that I've done, but like they all come together somehow. And through every step of my journey, whether I or not I feel like, oh my god, I'm going super left field, like what the heck, I'm leaving everything behind and like going to something completely like new that would not make sense to what I'm doing before, then later come to find out, bro, like this is helping me with what I used
Mhm.
to know. Because when I did massage therapy, you do have to know about the bones. You have to know about different pathologies, right? Like different sicknesses, different health conditions, like contraindications, as in like what condition can you have that is actually preventing you from being able to have a safe massage. Like if you have blood issues, heart conditions, there's even some infections that you can have in your body, or even if you have the flu, for example, like, those things are not good for you to come and get a massage, and it's not about protecting the massage therapist, it's about protecting you. Like, if you come in with a flu and get a massage, it's going to integrate that flu and that virus deeper into your bloodstream. So it's like, there's things that you wouldn't know as a regular client, that when you're a massage therapist, it's like different parts of anatomy and physiology just start clicking. Um but then while I was doing massages, I would then also get intuitive messages and connect it with chakras. So
Wow.
then I'd be able to like massage your shoulder or like your arm and be like, oh, this is what's happening with their heart chakra. And this is what they need to focus on after the massage is over. And the same thing would be with like the solar plexus, because with the heart chakra, with the knowledge that I know, the heart chakra can connect with your shoulders, with your arms. So it's like, of course, if I'm massaging the arm, I'm going to get like an intuitive hit of like their heart chakra. But that's not always the case. Like there's a special situation where like I received a message that someone's solar plexus was just not good at all. And I was massaging their back. Now, the back would cover bigger space, including the chakra body. But then it's kind of like with the information that I knew about the chakras and the energetic body, I was able to tie it into a material thing, something that's actually more like relatable to everybody, like every person. And be like, all right, so this is what I'm feeling. How can I relay a message that the person is going to receive so that when they come out of here, they're not like, oh my God, that woman was like woo woo, but they're like, oh,
Yeah,
wait, hold
that
on.
witch, that
Yeah.
who's the bruja.
Yeah. The bruja
Yeah.
over there, like trying to convert me. No, 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 not at all. Um, so it's just about little things. And I would just start a conversation. Like with one of them, I was like, okay, like, oh, are you feeling overwhelmed lately? It's like, yeah, I'm really overwhelmed. Like I'm doing this. She's like, oh, like, has anybody like asked to help you? Oh, funny enough that you say that. Like my husband was telling me that, like I should maybe relax, so I should let him do some things. And I'm like, yeah, you should. And that's tied to the heart chakra, like,
Yes.
it's just different things like that. I don't know, what was the question that you had originally asked? Because I'm kind of
Yeah,
like, I can
no,
go.
that's okay. That is exactly it.
Okay.
Just for someone who may not really know much about the different modalities that you practice, how do you express that to them?
Mm,
During a massage, the messages that you're receiving, how do you translate that information to someone who might not really be as open to hearing it from your perspective with your knowledge? But it's just so beautiful that you're still able to not even like, you don't have to push what you practice and like the magic that you do onto other people. You can bring that into the space and still help heal people through that way.
mhm.
And I want to know, how do you define healing and what role has it played in your life journey? I feel like healing is a journey in itself. And I think there's so many different ways to talk about it. But I'd love to know, what does healing mean to you? And when you hear that word.
I think that depending on when in my life I get asked this question is the answer that I would have. Because if you would have asked me this like 2 or 3 years ago, I would have had a completely answer than what I have now, and I'm sure that in a few years I'll have a different answer again. Um, but when it comes to healing, I just feel like the whole purpose of healing is how to find harmony within the self. And with harmony, you also, to an extent, have to know who you are, right? Like what is my base? What is my center? What is it that who am I for me to be able to be balanced and come back to center and just be able to live my life? Because there's a lot of things that we go through in life that take us off of our center,
Mm.
of our nervous system equilibrium, of our mental equilibrium, emotional equilibrium, any type of equilibrium, including our body and how it relates to like exercise or feeling extremely exhausted. Like all of those things play a part on how can we get back into equilibrium. So I think healing is just like a very fancy way of saying like how can you be harmonious again.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of harmony and being harmonious, where could you talk more about just different pivotal moments or maybe challenges that you've had in your life where it didn't feel like there was a lot of harmony and it felt like those healing moments for you? Speak about a couple of those and what was that like for you? And how did you know you were in that space?
Yeah. So not harmonious would be when I moved back into my parents' house
Okay.
for COVID.
Oh,
um yeah.
a lot of things happened around that time.
Oh,
Yes.
for sure, yeah. But even then, like when I moved back into my parents' house before COVID even happened, actually, let's just start there. Like I had already lived on my own for 2 years. And it's kind of like I was able to find a comfortable space where I created a sense of peace, like a sanctuary in my home where I didn't feel like I had to hide things in my room or like try to find ways to like not have my parents find XYZ. I don't know. And I say that because when I first bought my first Oracle deck, I was living with my parents and I felt ashamed of having it because at that point I was going through this whole religious like what's happening. Um which funny enough I have like Mother Mary right behind me. But anyways, I'm obsessed with her. I
I was
freaking
like,
love
we can
her.
talk more about that later. Yeah. I
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah, so it's like I was trying to hide that deck and so there was just like different conditionings that I'm sure my parents weren't trying to impose on me because funny enough, the more that I got over that fear of like I have to hide, I have to hide, I have to hide because my parents are not going to accept me. My parents are not going to appreciate this. Like when they found out that I could see auras, that I would do card readings, that I could sense energy, that I was having this connection with my great grandmother, especially for my dad because he grew up with her, with like the white witch that we talked about, right? And that was one of the most loved people that he lived with. So like when he found all of this out, like he's like, I used to experience very similar things that you do. I never wanted to impose this on you, but if it
Wow.
ever happened, I always hoped my children would come to me and talk to me about it. So it's kind of like I had this fear for no reason.
Mm.
Well, there was a reason.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like you had the reason for you, but it, until the light was shed onto it, you were able to really like be like, oh wait, this
Mhm.
this is exactly what we should be talking about then.
Yes. So it's like, at my house, and I won't go too much into it, but obviously, like, we have generational traumas that get passed down, and I do feel like they're diluted, like with every generation that passes, it dilutes, so it's not as
Mhm.
intense as it was before.
Yeah.
Um, but being in that environment is fast forwarding to COVID and the tension that we had, because now it's all five of us, my sisters, my parents, and I, in the same house, all of us working pretty much, all of us like dealing with like a pandemic, with our personal things, with our jobs, with all the changes happening, not being able to leave the house, not being able to have a break from each other, like that just built up. And that's when I was like, this is not it for me. I'm done. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna
Mm.
figure it out and I'm gonna get out of here, because at this point in my life, I've experienced harmony and I've experienced not harmony. So I'm not, mm-mm.
And what are if you want to talk about what are some of those things, whether, I know you talked a bit about kind of just the fear of sharing like the oracle deck and things like that, but what were the challenges like, with the generational trauma? Um, was it communication? Was it, just the way our families, I mean, I'm Puerto Rican too, and I can tell you like communication is woo, that is
Mm-hmm.
a topic. A lot of people in my family don't necessarily know how to communicate, and I do my best to teach that, but it's hard. So if you could just talk more about like the what did you even do to like kind of heal that part, those generate like what came to mind that needed healing while you're in your family's home and all these things were unraveling, that you had to get out. So what did you want to heal specifically for you?
Yes. So first, it was just bringing peace. I think that communication is definitely one of them. They don't they don't know how to communicate, and it's just kind of like holding it in until you can't hold it anymore, and then it just explodes, and it's just kind of like this is not effective. It's not
Yeah.
sustainable. It's not a good way to communicate. We're never gonna get anything done, because by the point that we talk about it, you're angry, you're projecting, and then it's like if I'm trying to like explain my side, you're just gonna be like, no. So it's just,
Just yeah. So
yeah.
would you say, I mean, this was that like spiritual awakening for you in this moment, or did it happen before you moved back home? Like, was it happening and then you moved back home and then after it kind of exploded and you were like, whoa. So I'd love to
Yeah.
know more, like, what was that spiritual awakening moment? Because I know you talk a lot about that. So was this it?
This was definitely it, actually, because so, like, when I moved back home, I also started a new job, and I got a crystal because I was supporting a friend, and that crystal changed my life in a week. It was not moldavite, it was a clear quartz. It was a clear quartz crystal, and it changed my life in a week. I found peace, I found harmony. My coworker that would piss me off every day at work, all of a sudden, not
Didn't
bothering me at all.
piss you off.
Yeah, I was just like, "Oh, okay," and I knew it was the crystal, and that was something that I have within my blood because my great-grandmother would work with crystals, so, like, that affinity that I have with working with crystals and energy was just ignited the moment that I put on that clear quartz on, and it's funny that I never encountered any type of crystal until I was, like, 22, 23 years old. Like,
Mm.
that's when I first interacted with a crystal. So, everything happened in divine timing, because at that time, I also had a coworker that was obsessed with crystals. So, she pretty much took me under her wing, and she was kinda like my safe space to talk about spiritual things when she saw that I started wearing crystals, and she's the one that helped not deviate me, but, like, guide me towards
Yeah.
cards and tarot and oracle cards, and I remember when I first got my first card reading done, I was like, "This is I'm betraying God, I'm betraying
Mm.
Jesus, like, what am I doing with my life?" And she's like, it's really not that bad, I promise. And I was like, okay. I didn't want to buy a crystal. I wore one and it made me feel better. So I just got to trust, even though I'm scared. I
Yeah.
did it. Best thing ever. 10 out of 10. But then again, like a lot of times when people get card readings, they think it's like in the movies, like, oh, I'm gonna tell you your future. And there are some people that do that. Like, especially if you go to like New Orleans and you see someone on the street, they'll tell you when you'll die. Yeah, that's possible. That is
Mm.
a thing. That's like a
Yeah,
set. But the woman that I went to see was more focused on how can you better yourself? How can you come back to you? How can you find the truth that lies within your heart? And those are the people that I like getting my readings from because that's what I strive for. And I don't ever want to get a card reading where it's like I have to keep coming back to that same person for answers. Like I want to be getting services with someone that is there to empower me for me to become my full self so then I can carry on the work as well. Like now
Mhm.
we can tag team, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think I want to talk a little bit about the transition of your unraveling with religion, with spiritual practices. And I know a lot of times for me as well, going into like more spiritual aspects of life, it did feel wrong in a way because I was raised in a Christian home. And I mean, just simple like lighting sage or something like that is like, what are you doing? But it's so interesting now, years later, my family is like, hey, what should I do with this sage? I want to bless my home. And they're coming to me now. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
but years ago, you were saying you were calling me a bruja and a weirdo and a lot of different things. But then the other side to that is I grew up in a home where my grandmother would light candles. I have one actually right now. I haven't lit it just yet. It is the Milagros. I don't know if maybe you know which one it is, but my mom told me to buy it. Interesting, right? Christian woman. But these are and write a letter under it and do this ritual. And this is something my grandmother actually did. And she passed away in 2022. And she would light a candle. And I just never understood, like, there was just such extremes. Like if you do one thing, light a candle, but then also going to church on Sundays and believing in Jesus and being saved, there was so many things where I did feel confused. So I want to know, what was your unraveling like? Because I've seen you through your journey, but I'm sure someone out there needs to hear, how do you kind of find, I guess, harmony within that, coming from a more religious background?
Yeah. So the way that I found harmony within that was the way that it's supposed to happen, where it's kind of like you're involved in this scenario and you're like, what the heck? I've been lied to, and I completely separate and go to the other extreme, right?
Okay.
And then I found my way back in the middle, which is where I'm at now. So I used to be, I did my communion.
Okay.
I would be the person, if you're Catholic or maybe even Christian as well, you would know like different parts of the mass. Like I would be the person to read the scripture during mass. I was also the person to give the blood of Christ during mass. I would go to Bible study every Wednesday and go to church every Saturday evening because I was the Spanish mass and I like the Spanish mass better than the like English mass. And sometimes I would go to the youth mass just because I like the Christian rock that they would play.
Hmm.
Um, but it was on Sundays, and I'm like, I'd rather just stay home on like Sunday evening. But anyways, so like I used to do that, and I did it very religiously for like a year and a half.
Religious.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then there was one point where I got cheated on by an ex, and I've heard people going to the church and sitting next to the Eucharist and they find peace in that. So I was like, okay, like let me try that. Like I'm
Mm.
heartbroken, I'm in despair, like hopefully Jesus can help me. So I went and I sat there and I didn't feel any different. And I was like, hmm. After that, I started noticing more hypocrisy when it came to the Bible study people, when it came to the different things that were said in mass. Like it pisses me off to this day when I go to church on like Easter or like on New Year's or like on Noche Buena, like Christmas Eve. And like the priest always has like a 5-10 minute lecture on how we need to go to church every day. I'm like, this only happens when the church is packed. If you really cared about it, you would say it every single Sunday. But no, it's only when the church is packed. So like to me, like those different practices, like this is a business. This is not like, I mean, yeah, sure, there's faith in it, but I can see the business aspect. And I have actually, I guess, I've been always able to tell when scarcity is a part of a vibe. I've
Ooh.
been becoming a lot better at that. But like, it's like whenever I feel those vibes, I'm kind of like,
Mm.
I don't want to deal with it. I realize that you can't see my face if you're listening to the audio, but I made a stank face.
Oh,
So,
that's okay.
anyways,
This is also going on YouTube, so we're gonna see your face.
see my stank face. See my
We'll see
stank
the
face.
same face.
Yeah. So anyway, so then I got that card reading, the tarot reading that changed my life. And in that moment, during the card reading, she's like, you're gonna be angry at Christianity, at
Ooh.
Catholicism, at your parents, because you've grown up with this mindset of cards are bad, crystals are bad, energy healing is bad. And now here you are finding peace with this. So and she was right. Like I was like, I'm not gonna be angry. I was so angry. I stopped going to church. I didn't want to go and look at the Bible anymore. Like I would go to church with my family whenever my grandparents would visit, and I would just stay sitting down.
So you
Like I
went to the
wouldn't.
yeah, you really went to the extreme, like, just
Yeah,
had to cut it all out.
yeah. And then about a year and a half later of me doing spiritual practices like yoga, Reiki, chakra energy healing, I also received shamanic healing for like soul retrievals and stuff like that. But I haven't, at this point, I didn't go into actual shamanic practices or like ceremonies. I was just receiving like soul retrievals, right? And like card readings. At one point, as I was getting a soul retrieval done, when we were done, the medicine woman told me like Jesus came in and Jesus said that you're ready to work with him again. And I was
Ooh.
like, Jesus, why is he here? And I was like,
Oh my
no, I don't want to
goodness.
talk to Jesus. Just like,
Mhm.
that's what Jesus told me. I'm just telling you.
Oh.
And I was like, okay. So then that made me curious. And that's when I started to learn about Christ consciousness.
Ooh.
But there's this new age thing happening with Christ consciousness that I feel like is distorting what Christ consciousness actually is. And there's a more old age, like a more not indigenous, but an ancestral way of thinking called
Okay.
Gnosticism that is really what Christ consciousness is about. And Gnosticism is the precursor to Christianity before it became a patriarchal religion.
Mm.
So I've been getting into a lot of that. And under Gnosticism, we have the Sophia, we have Mary Magdalene as a priestess, we have Mother Mary as a priestess as well. We have Jesus Christ as a priest who was walking down a very feminine path. And if you read the Bible, Jesus is surrounded by a lot of women all
Mm.
of the time. And one
Yeah.
of the reasons why he wasn't accepted by a lot of different communities, like the Romans, like the Jews, the Hebrews, was because of the fact that he had so many women around him, because the Romans and the Hebrews at that time didn't really allow space for women to coexist with men, especially in a spiritual and religious way. So for him to do that, it was kind of like, this is a joke. Like, this can't be serious. Like, you have women around you, you know? Um, even the women are literally like the gateway between the
Yeah.
veils.
So you really have gone on this journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, you have gone to the extremes of I don't want to talk or nothing about Jesus to now really understanding again and kind of coming back and understanding religion in a way that is connected to your ancestry, connected to the deeper indigenous ways. Because as we know, religion evolves. It evolves
Yeah.
over time, right? Um, yeah, thank you, for talking more about that because I think especially like on this podcast, becoming so you is all aspects of ourselves. Like spirituality can go so many different ways. And I wanted to just really bring that into the space today. Okay, so now I really want to talk about some things that could be helpful to anyone listening about, this is Becoming Solely You. And what types of things do you implement in your life when it comes to personal growth, self improvement, and kind of just that self acceptance of who you are? Like you've been on a path, but what has helped you get to this, this path now of who you are today?
The reason why I'm like pausing a little bit is because I had a
Yeah.
dream about this question. So yeah, I had a dream about this question. So something that's helped me, and I'm gonna talk about it in the same way that I talked about it in my dream. So I'm into astrology as well. I'm into a lot of things.
Yes.
Um,
You do a
but
lot. You do a
I
lot.
do yes,
Yeah.
I do a lot, but like honestly, everything has complemented each other. And even though I do a lot, doesn't mean that whenever I work with other people, I do a lot. Like if someone comes to me because they want to learn about astrology, that's all we talk about. If someone wants to come to me because they want to learn cards or they want a card reading, that's what we talk about. If someone is opening up the door to religion and spirituality and they're open, and I can feel that back and forth, which is kind of funny because it did happen. I went to a bar like a couple weeks ago, and then we met up with like one of my husband's friends, and then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna study a little bit more about religion, and then he started going down this rabbit hole, and I was like, oh my god, I got you. I'm gonna meet you right there. So, anyways, like I know a lot about different things, but I think it's more because I like to just learn and read, and that's just who I am at this point. Well, the explanation that I had was, how did I learn more about myself and kind of just find that? And so I've realized who I am emotionally, right? And I'll give a better picture in the sense of like, if you know astrology, my moon is in Capricorn. And if you read about Moon in Capricorn, you'll read all of these different things, right? But it's like, what does that mean for me, right? And
Mhm.
that's the tricky part about astrology. It's like you get all these cookie cutter, like if you're a Gemini, you're this. If you're like a Cancer, you're that. And it's like, yeah, but that's like saying like a regular Oreo is the same thing as a golden Oreo. No, they're both Oreos, but one of them is, chocolate. The other one is vanilla. Like, no, they're not the same. So when it came to that, I realized that I'm a very logical person. I am.
Okay.
And I take my time processing my emotions. So I've learned through my spiritual practices that the more self care I give myself, the more in my quote unquote moon in Capricorn I behave as. Like, the more I take care of myself, the more I actually can process my emotions before I respond or react,
Mm.
right? So, like, if something happens and then I get triggered and I start responding quickly, I'm like sending all these text messages, calling everybody up, like, what the heck is happening, researching something. Like, I know I'm not acting from a harmonious space. But, and I'm not saying that you have to deflect. Again, this is me, and I'm speaking about my moon in Capricorn, right? Like,
Mhm.
if you're a moon in Aries, maybe your way is to go off, right? But you,
Like, we know the Aries energy.
yeah. So it's like, how do you find what works for you? So I've been realizing that for myself. And then also, whenever I feel anxious or just like my anxiety coming up, I'm like, okay, I can do one of two things. I can either try to find a way to calm my body, or I can try to find a way to feed my anxiety. What am I going to choose?
Mm, mm. So it's really about knowing who you are at the end
Yeah.
of the day. Like, you know what works for you and what doesn't. And I think sometimes if we don't know who we, really are, we struggle to find what we need in that moment.
Yeah.
And okay, so what advice would you give to someone who's on their own journey? I know you mentioned a lot of like self-care, but if what advice would you give to someone who's on their own journey of becoming more authentic to themselves, like of who they are, whether that is, tapping more into a spiritual part of themselves or whatever that may look like, but just living in authenticity. What advice would you want to give to someone listening right now?
This is funny. The advice that I would give first and foremost is stop doing shadow work. Don't do shadow work.
Ooh.
Don't try to look at your traumas. Don't
Ooh.
try to figure out your mommy wounds, your daddy wounds.
Ooh.
No. Instead of focusing your energy and feeding into that shadow work area and like all of your traumas, like feed what you enjoy, right? Like feed going out with your friends, feed finding more authentic connections, feed going to classes that you haven't gone before of things that interest you, feed going to workshops, feed going into women's circles or men's circles, right? Feed like going to your YMCA or community center nearby, like feed things that bring you joy, because the more you feed into joy, the easier it'll be for you to know like what you like, what you don't like, and that's literally who you are. Like what you like is who you are. So that would be the easiest form of advice. Now, journaling does help too, and you can definitely journal as a way to get to know yourself. But I just feel like sometimes people, because I did this, like people get into a spiral of shadow work and shadow work and shadow work. And I feel like if I would have used my time towards the beginning of my journey, instead of like the things that I wanted to release, more of the things that I wanted to bring in, like the things that I
Ooh.
wanted to release would have gone to make space for what I'm trying to bring into my life.
Wow. I don't think some people are ready for that answer, because that has me sitting here like, "Oh, okay, you speaking to me." Like, "Oh gosh." But wow, that is, yes. Wow. Thank you. That is so deep, and I think I truly do agree with you. I think we are in a lot of, I don't want to say like victimizing ourselves, but it's not our parents' fault. And I mean, I've talked about this. Like, it's not my parents' fault that, the way that they experienced life was the way they experienced life, and the way that they all unraveled for them and trickled into how I was part of that narrative
Hmm.
is um is something that I don't have to hold on to. I could just invite more of the joy into my life. So that really hits my heart right now. So thank you. Becoming your most authentic self is, and I just want you to fill that in.
I love this. I just got chills. Becoming your most authentic self is moving in the direction of your heart
Mm.
from a place of love. You know what? Becoming your authentic self is becoming your Venus self. Be Aphrodite, girl. Be in that love, be in that pleasure. Aphrodite doesn't give an F about what anybody thinks. She's over here promiscuous,
Mm,
knowing what the best heavenly penis there is out there. She doesn't
mm.
question, oh, what do these other women say about me? Nah, girl. We still look up to her. We're like, we want to be like Aphrodite. Yes, we do.
Wow. Okay. And whoever needed to hear that and receive it and receive it. So, we're coming to the end, and I think my last question is going to be, how do people, okay, this is it. How do people kind of hold themselves back from actually becoming their most authentic self? Like, what have you noticed that people go through and that kind of just doesn't help them propel? And like, what are those blockages?
Um, I can narrow it down to loneliness, um, and just like fear of being alone. I
Ooh.
feel like people don't like to change because it's kind of like, like if I stop gossiping, who's gonna care about what I have to say? Like I'm not interesting if I don't gossip about other people. Or like if now I stop drinking, who's gonna want to hang out with me? Like I'm gonna be sober Sally over here. No one's gonna wanna spend time. Or if I start doing yoga or start doing different practices, try to start to go to bed earlier, it's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna have to like give something up, and it's gonna be what I love most right now. I think what holds people back is that anxiety of being alone, is that anxiety of like, I don't know what's going to happen when I start implementing these changes. Because right now I'm quote unquote comfortable. Yeah, I might have depression. Yeah, I might
Mm,
have anxiety. Yeah, I might be like binge eating, but I'm
mm,
comfortable. I could
mm,
do better, but what I
mm,
need to do, I'm not doing, like it's really that, like the fear of like, who am I going to be? What is my life going to look like? The unknown. It's the unknown. So I will share that I really changed my life when I went and did a shamanic ceremony, right? Because in that ceremony, I was forced to let go. I was forced to surrender. I was forced to change so I would survive. And it's not that bad. Like, I literally wasn't going to get killed. I wasn't going to die at all. But in my brain, I was. In my brain, I felt like I was getting buried alive, right? So I went into panic mode. And I don't suggest that you go into primal or primitive shamanic ceremonies if you're not ready for them. Like, it took me 2 or 3 years of like really going to therapy and like doing different practices to calibrate my nervous system to the point that where I did the shamanic ceremony, like even though I was freaking out, I had tools under my belt to be able to bring me back to center. It wasn't easy. My
mm.
heart still like shakes thinking about that ceremony, and I've done it multiple times afterwards, and I still get anxiety. It's still scary for me. It's hard. It's always going to be hard for me to do that ceremony. It was a sweat lodge. It was a temazcal. Like for me, it was super intense, and it still continues to be intense. Um, but putting myself in that situation helps me come back to center and realize that for me to live the life that I want to live, I have to sacrifice things that don't align with who I want to become.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot we could definitely keep talking about. But that loneliness part about the journey, becoming your most authentic self does have some loneliness in that process because you're going to be releasing a lot from your life. And you speak about changing the friend groups or readjusting who's going to continue to come along on the journey too. If you don't want to drink as much or if you want to sit at home and read books about and educate yourself, that's going to require removing yourself from a lot of different situations. So
Yeah.
I have definitely been there. I feel like I may kind of be in that space now, with moving out of my comfort. But it's ultimately to become just your most authentic self. It really is to become that. And you had your hand raised. Are we in class? I'm
Yes,
just
we are in
kidding.
class. I
Yeah.
always raise my hand. I'm like, I
I
wanted
know.
to say something, I guess, quick because I know we're coming to the end
Yeah.
of this. I want to talk a little bit about the alcohol portion, right? Like, I think I went a year and a half without drinking at all. And now, even then, like, I don't really drink as much. I might have a glass of wine, but I do have to listen to my body. Because if I don't listen to my body and I override it, I skip the buzzness and I go straight into a hangover. Like, it doesn't affect me the way it used to affect me. But all of that to say that it was hard for me at first because it's like everyone questioned why I gave up alcohol. And it would be a topic of conversation like, oh my God, you're not drinking. Oh my God, party pooper. Oh my God, you're like sorry, my mood. I'm like, bit like, I'm not drinking and I'm having a great time. Why is my choice to
Decision.
not
Yeah.
drink, like affecting your litness? Like that makes no sense. But then thankfully there were like little angels here and there. Like for example, there was one time I went to like a wedding and like we were having fun. It's 3 in the morning. I'm sober. Everybody else is not. And some person's like, hey, like, can I get you a drink? And I was like, no, actually, like I'm just drinking water. It's like,
Mhm.
wait, you're not drinking? I'm like, no, I'm not drinking. It's like, oh my God, you're this lit and you're sober? It's like, yeah, yeah, thank you. And it's like, there was one time that we went out with like some friends of mine, and like this was the first time that people were offering me drinks, and I was like, no, I'm not feeling it. It's like, okay, bet. And then they moved them to the next person, and like my husband was like, no one was questioning it. This is like the first time that we both felt this because he would defend me.
Yes.
He would still drink, but he would defend me. He's like, I didn't have to defend you. They understood. And I was like, yeah. So it's like there are people out there that are not going to feel some type of way. If they do feel some type of way, it's probably because they shouldn't be drinking
Hmm.
and they're salty that you're not drinking and you're choosing to do something for yourself and they're still not.
Yes. Yes, I definitely feel that. I'm in a new relationship with alcohol as well. So, we're growing here, we're evolving, and we're becoming, the best versions of ourselves as much as we can. Um, so tell us more about how we could find more about you, what types of things are unfolding for you in the future, and how could we work anyone listening work with you or learn more about what you do?
Yes, so my main place would honestly be my Instagram page. It is Vibes del Alma. Um, and Vibes of Your Soul, Vibes del Alma. And that's because I do have a website. And it is also like vibeselalma.com. But for right now, I'm trying to rebrand in a way, not really rebrand, but just like kind of refigure out what I'm going to have under Vibes del Alma. So it's vibeselalma.square.site, you know. So it's like if you go to my Instagram, you'll have the link to my actual website. And with that being said, I currently have some services like card readings, astrology readings. I have a womb healing service. I have a Akashic record and healing service for your chakras. And every now and then I do like a workshop, and I have also done card reading. Like if you want to learn how to do card readings, I've done a cohort for that. I've also done cohorts for if you want to learn how to be a Reiki master. And I currently have like an online course that you can do that. It's 3 classes. It should not be more than like 6 hours long. Like there's videos that go through everything. And that's what I have for now. I'm sure in a year and a half, 2 years, everything's going to change because I've been in a beautiful limbo space where all of these things are alchemizing and distilling. And the only thing that's been constant since the very beginning of my journey to now is that I also have a podcast. So I
Yes.
know that that's probably not going to change. And if you want to learn about that, then that's also on my Instagram page, Vibes Selena. Everything's just there. Everything just always comes back to Instagram. So that's where you can find me.
Okay, so make sure you all go and check out Vibes del Alma on Instagram. And also you could just Google Vibes del Alma and you'll see all the stuff come up because I did my little Google search and it all comes up. So um is there anything else you want to share today as we wrap up? Anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, the last thing that I'll say is for anybody listening and them wanting to heal and just like become their authentic self, like just know that it's a process and that every step is meant to happen. You know, like you can't go from step 0 to step 100 without taking steps in between. Sure, we can skip 2 to 3 steps, but that depends on how tall you are. But you can't skip it all the way from the beginning to the end. So just know that whatever you're going through, whatever direction you're being sent down on, like it's all meant for something. It all means something and it's all going to help you somehow. So just take it one step at a time. And as long as with every day you are learning how to be a better version of yourself, like that's all that matters. Maybe yesterday you blew off on someone and today you're like, you bite your tongue. That's improvement.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. It's been really great. And yeah, I'm so happy that, the universe connected us. We're continue to be connected. And I know that we'll continue to evolve and grow. And thank you for your time.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the first workshop I ever did was because of Chelsea. I just want to
Oh,
put that out there.
okay. What was the workshop?
It was the chakras, the chakra self-care one.
Oh, yes. Okay, I love that. Yep, we brought you on to solely her, do a workshop, and everything just continues to unravel.
Mhm.
So beautiful. All right, thank you.